It's the 15th of December 2021. I'm your host, Dana Durnford. I'm also known as the nuclear proctologist.org. And for a limited time, you can call in 709-589-4406. All the phone lines are open. Yeah. So should we have a poll tonight? Law poll. Should chemotherapy be banned and replaced with DCA? And DCA, you can order it from Amazon. They do deliver it to Canada, but you can't order it in Canada. Canada banned it because they didn't want people treating themselves for cancer. Now, this was shown in studies to reduce all cancers by 70%. Reduced all cancers by 70%. All cancers by 70%. And you can get pills, powder, and it's 99.9%. Means it's not pure. It's very, very close, obviously, but it's not caustic. And what happens is caustic in its raw form. So with the powder, typically with the pure, and you can get pure DCA right there. You can also get pills. Again, the pills are 99.9% purities. 180 capsules. And so a couple of $100 to cure cancer, basically. It's a pretty good deal, you ask me. And I'll show you why I'm saying that, because we have the studies and everything now that quantifies those assertions. There's no money in cures, right? So lead aprons offer little protection, and it's worse than that. The apron is an outdated practice. What happens is the x-ray machines, the CAT scans, basically calibrate themselves to get the x-ray. So if you got a lead apron there, you're going to get a brutal dose. They've been trying to get people to stop using the apron, but it's so entrenched in society, right? So you're getting a brutal dose. Everybody who ever got an x-ray has been brutalized by the nuclear industry and their loved ones. When it comes to chemotherapy, only 3% of the people survive longer with it than without it. So estimated to be 2.3% in Australia and 2.1% in the United States. To justify the continued funding and availability of drugs used in chemotherapy, we need a rigorous evaluation of the cost effectiveness and impact on the quality of life. So one could assume between 1985 and 2005, along with trillions of cancer research dollars, one would like to think the cure rate has increased from a mere 3%. So let's be honest, spontaneous remission has a higher success rate than chemotherapy. Like cancer to just suddenly randomly stop is more likely to survive hoping for that outcome than you are of taking the chemotherapy. Potentially, one could reach the logical and factual conclusion that doing nothing when diagnosed with the symptoms of cancer is a better medical choice than opting for chemotherapy. Talk about a genocide. with definitely a higher quality of life than the presented by chemotherapy. However, please realize as every one of you begin to think for themselves, then the unemployment rate in America would likely skyrocket, since cancer is now the largest revenue generator in America. There's no money in cures. Which brings you back to the DCA. Why did they ban it in Canada with no public input when it's just a mineral with no adverse side effects, because it was used on exotic diseases and showed absolutely it's just a mineral. It's like taking vitamin D or vitamin C or vitamin E. Right? So the studies on it reduced all tumors by 70% in the first 3 weeks, and after 3 months were cancer-free. And for them to produce it without the big profit margin would only be a couple of pennies per dose. And then so Canada, out in Alberta, was professor couldn't get funding because it's a cancer cure. There's no money in cures. So they spend $900,000 on a cancer patient in Canada with the healthcare. Then they send them home to die, typically, if they don't die at the hospital. So there's a bigger success rate by reviving the hospitals. That's frightening, that only 3% is surviving. And so I think all doctors who give people chemotherapy should have to take the same doses if the victim dies. That'll put an end to that racket in a hurry. Cassandra is a typical case in North America where the nuclear industry, the revolting, despicable, disgusting, wretched nuclear industry, has made laws that if your child gets cancer, then legally they have to take chemotherapy till they die. So she went to a legal fight, and the courts took her from her home, placed her under guard in a children's medical hospital, and intravenously dripped her with chemo till she finally died. And when she was about to die, they got rid of her and sent her home with her mother to die. That's the law in a lot of places. In Canada too, they'll kidnap your child. If you won't give them the chemo, they'll just kidnap the child, put it in the put the victim in the hospital under guard, keep them there until they die of the chemo. That's only 3% effective. For adults, you got to sign a piece of paper saying that if you die from the chemo, your family can't sue the doctor or the hospital or the people who make the chemo, which is the nuclear industry. Rather than store waste for millions of years, they get it injected in your bodies. And like they say, no two chemos are the same. Nuclear radiation is the most carcinogenic thing that exists on top of that. And child's risk of cancer from radiation is 100 times higher than adults. So if the child goes in the hospital to get chemo, they end up with cancer whether they had it or not. Because by the way, 3% is the typical misdiagnosis for cancer. If your child is misdiagnosed for cancer, too bad. The state demands they kill the child with chemo or wreck them permanently. In Fukushima Prefecture, instead of 1 in a million to 2 in a million children with thyroid tumors, 13,646. Not out of a million, but out of 40,000. In other words, it's 358,000 out of a million when you scale it up, when it used to be 1 to 2 per million. Introduction of radiation injuries, a silent epidemic. Way worse than coronavirus. Congenital heart disease operations rose 14.2% of the children have to get open heart surgeries per 100,000 newborns, neonates, across Japan. This is 14,200 children got to get open heart surgery when they're born, or they're going to die or have incredible illnesses for the rest of their lives. This is absurd numbers. It's a warning shot across the bow of humanity. But that's applicable to the animal kingdom also. But, you know, they don't get open heart surgery in the animal kingdom. Did you know that? Radiation-induced kidney injuries when you get chemo. Think about all these side effects of chemo. Hypoxia, blood spinal cord barrier disruptions, and central nervous system radiation injuries. Radiation-induced lung injuries, bowel injuries from radiation, kidney injuries from radiation, side effects of breast radiation, or breast radiation injury litigation, because all these women were getting cancer to the breast from cancer treatments. It wasn't an accident, by the way. It was over 10 million women were misdiagnosed in a decade period in the United States and had their breast removed when they didn't even have breast cancer. The whole industry is a lunatic. Central nervous system radiation injuries. Sounds like a big party if you're a nuclear scientist, right? Radiation-induced injuries to the visual pathways, to the hearts. Radiation injuries to the intestines, permanent syndromes. Radiation-induced brain narcosis. And so 3% of the people surviving chemotherapy in the hospital is not very good. So what's the alternative, Dana? Well, it ain't chemo too. DCA. There's a lot of sites out there demonizing a mineral because, you know, it cures cancer, right? There's no hate clubs out there for vitamin C or vitamin D, but there's hate clubs out there for DCA from the nuclear industry. Should chemotherapy be banned and replaced with something like DCA, which has no adverse side effects whatsoever, and so far showed a stellar 100% success rate in all the cancers that it approached? We got a resounding 100% on that tonight. Roll, baby. How low doses of radiation also causes heart diseases and strokes. So we're going to show you a bunch of pictures of the reactors. This is part 4. There's links below to the pictures. There's 99 folders of pictures. We're trying to make sense of it from the original nuclear meltdown. And we're pretty good at making sense of their gibberish, I can tell you. High radiation levels around the plant prevented helicopters from dumping water on the spent fuel pools at the top of the reactor buildings that didn't exist anymore. France says Japan lost control. The French should leave the country. These couple of headlines are around the time of the pictures I'm going to show you, by the way. Water can and can't spray the reactors. Turns away because the radiation levels are too high. So the helicopters can't do it either. So the water cannons can't do it. The helicopters can't do it. France is, and the same day, France is like, they've lost control. Get out now, run. And France knows a thing or two about misery from radiation because they irradiated the entire population of the Polynesians, for starters. High radiation forces withdrawal of workers. So that's 3 strikes, you're out of the old ballpark. It's time to make a geezer suicide and bring squad and bring in the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society. We're going to run out of them in 5 years, TEPCO admits. So all of Japan must face it. Tokyo vice governor suggested a Fukushima draft. Never heard of that for your coal plant, oil or gas plants, I bet you, did you? Did you? Concerned half of Japan be covered in nuclear waste. 16 older should prepare to die at the local power plant. Yeah, if there is intelligent civilizations anywhere near enough to be monitoring us, they're going, facepalm, that planet is down, baby. It'll take us with it if we show our faces there. 60 and older should be prepared to die at your coal plant? No. 60 and older should be prepared to die at your gas plant. Right, Dana? No. 60 and older should be prepared to die at your oil plant. Right, Dana? No. At your nuclear plant? Woo! Score! Give me 50 push-ups. All of eastern Japan evacuated. The Fukushima plant was abandoned. So if your power plant, if your coal plant breaks down, do you evacuate half your country? Like, have you ever heard tell of a headline like that for gas, oil, or coal, or anything else? 16,000 workers agreed and ran the frig out of there.
Another example, immediately after the first hydrogen explosion, TEPCO gave out an order a request to all of these labor dispatching companies, and they said, send us people who don't mind dying.
And they all fell down. So that was just because that's what they do at nuclear plants. If you go way back to the 50s, when Sellafield melted down, people were taken from the movie theaters by the police and forced to go into the nuclear meltdowns.
The police from the factory had turned up looking for volunteers, and they brought a bus, and they decided the best way to get the volunteers was to go to the cinema and volunteer the back 2 rows at the show to go into the factory to
Get
as it
fucking
turned out
irradiated
to
and die.
help push the.
This is outrageous. Homeless people are being sold to companies and put to work on Fukushima radiation. Should the people who own those companies get chemotherapy till they die? Should they use chemotherapy to kill prisoners with the death penalty? Just give them a big dose, that'll be all. Stick a neutron suppository up on it while you're at it. This is outrageous. Homeless people. Now this is Forbes. Pro-nuclear as you get. Forbes, so nuclear, the building would be blowing up and they'd be like, there's nothing wrong here, this is ridiculous, everything is perfect. Temporary workers fighting to repair the crippled Japanese temporary workers. They take temporary jobs, usually menial jobs, and because there's no scientists to be found anywhere near this place, all they can get is day workers. You don't need passports to work at Fukushima, that's the rumor. UN official astounded, which is astounding in all on its own, by the way. Homeless are taken to work in Fukushima ready to die. At the end of the month, if they're still alive, they got no pay. They end up in debt for working at a nuclear meltdown. Because nuclear scientists are not going to go there. Who should go there? Nuclear students are not going there. So the mentally handicapped are going there. So the pictures are going to show you tonight. I want you to think about all of that, who you're actually looking at in the pictures, okay? The unskilled and the destitute. Because the radioactive plumes are covering the planet. How bad is it going to be at ground zero, Dana? It's bad, man. It's going to be bad. How bad, Dana? Well, it's bad. I know that. How bad? I'll show you. Take your time. Relax. This is Radio Faller from France. This is in 16 days. Do you think you escaped this? You think that this doesn't affect you and your loved ones and your friends and your families and your communities? Because you're dreaming if you do. You're a dreamer, and that illusion is going to get snatched away from you at some point. You're going to have to face the reality of what took place, and still we got to deal with it. We can't pretend it's not happening and blame it on something that is not, and come up with solutions by blaming it on something that is not. This is criminal beyond concept. It's an incredible public relation campaign by an industry. You heard the word climate footprint. Where do you think that came from? It's a public relation campaign by no other than an oil company that had an accident that contaminated the Gulf of Mexico. BP Oil. Help wanted ad seeks employees that can carry out a conversation. Help wanted ad seeks people that can carry out a conversation. So when I show you these pictures, this is the picture we left off on last night. And this picture is number 42 from the 42nd set and was taken on the 28th of March, 17 days after. Inside the power station site, it's a 17 megabyte file and 26 megabyte of 46. So that's quite a few pictures right there. Let's zip through them. They're just showing you around the site at the time. Now, they brought in that truck. This is a cement truck. And they got water. Allegedly, what they done was strapped the water hoses onto it. This is incredibly big. It's hard to appreciate it, but that's the top of a 190-foot building, 19-story building right there. Because it's a power plant, it's not like an apartment building. It's an incredible big building. And the people that are taking this are inside of a car, by the looks of it. And then they get out of Dodge right quick, right? This is completely lost reactor. This is reactor 4. You can see the reactor 4 up there. And so remember that the people that are there, and we've got a poll tonight, should chemotherapy be banned and replaced with DCA? We covered at the beginning of it. Remember that help wanted ad seeks employees that can carry out a conversation at the site. We got to get through this first. Some people not being given food have no place to go. This is the time at the Fukushima plant. Co-workers are really tempered and they use violence sometimes. Avoid the death ash. TEPCO raises the safe limit 500 times the original level, which was 180 counts per minute. I have 290 counts per minute on my Geiger counter. I'm supposed to evacuate my home as we speak, by the way. People, so does it sound like nuclear scientists? Nuclear scientist. Instead of Fukushima worker, put in nuclear academic or nuclear scientist. I wanted to escape the nuclear power plant, but feared they might hurt me. I bet you get some attention then, wouldn't you, if you had a nuclear scientist saying they couldn't get out of there. TEPCO made the nuclear scientist stay there. No, this was the homeless. Top Tokyo doctor dealing with the nuclear scientists at Fukushima demands the government step in for safety reasons. Some of the nuclear scientists are unable to read. That's terrifying, Dana. Concern rising at Fukushima plant. 16,000 nuclear scientists have quit. People get their ass geared in. I'm like, what the hell, man? That must be dangerous. Yeah, it is. But you're talking about being at the plant. It's hard to wrap your mind around it. It's hard to wrap your mind around it. Time to quit nuclear power altogether threatens the very existence of human civilization as we know it. It does that by radioactive fallout. This was 20 days later. So if you gave another 10 days, it covers the rest of the planet, right? The model doesn't stop just because they only ran it for... At 20 days, like, no, stop the model on 20 days. Don't do another second. Don't publish the big one. Just publish the one that goes the 31st of March. That's madness, boy. 450,000 times above detection levels in Fukushima in Washington. Now, I know this little weasel down in Washington was calling me up and being a nuclear prick, basically. So I read off a few of these headlines to him. I said, hey, stupid, my Geiger counter's not going to fucking pick that up, moron. You moron. Okay, so for those who are still confused, and I'm sure there's one or two of you on the planet, let me just run quickly through Fukushima, because that's how it works. You had a tsunami, and you had an earthquake and then a tsunami. And Fukushima plant in particular you're looking at, the tsunami ran right through the site, through all the reactors. Okay, so imagine trying to swim against that. How does that work? Then, if you can't swim against it, it's likely it done a lot of damage. I can assure you, it does a lot of damage. Imagine these explosions, plant explosions. Now, 5 to 10 sieverts is considered, well, 10 is considered a lethal dose. These buildings were emitting over 1 million sieverts. 1 million sieverts. And Reactor 1, which is what you're looking at right here, was reportedly caused by an earthquake. Here's the actual explosion of the #1 reactor buildings. It looks just like the three you're seeing there right now. They're 190-foot buildings. So imagine how bad that explosion was. So what they've done with this building originally, which is #1 you're looking at, Reactor, there's multiple reactors meltdown, was they brought in cranes. They had a assembled jigsaw puzzle they've done with cranes. And you see how big the panel is that they're moving? They just go in and they have gravity clamps on them, and they just clamp onto the structure. There's nobody can stand there. They'll die right away. And the cranes are remote controlled. So they sealed the building, and they murdered a lot of homeless and destitute and victims of society. But they sealed the buildings, that building in particular, and vented it up to skinny stacks, like the 700-foot skinny stacks. The stacks, by the way, are so radioactive you can't get near them. A human can't survive by going close to the stacks. So how can you survive going close to the nuclear meltdown, right? This was a Kevlar stack, a Kevlar sarcophagus they put on the Reactor 1. But it was venting the entire time. The reactor core was actually gone down into the earth, and China syndrome, and split the earth in many places. And the steam that was coming up as lethal doses. The fuel pools at the top of the buildings burnt and were dispersed. And what wasn't dispersed also went into a China syndrome and liquefied 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. And they killed an incredible amount of homeless people. But about 5 years later, they had to disassemble Reactor 1. Now, if you took a piece of this Kevlar sarcophagus and brought it to the New York subway, say 1 square foot of it, and you left it there, everybody walked past it probably will die that day or that week. That's how lethal. Because when you put something in a sarcophagus, the building now is emitting gamma shines, X-rays, neutron bursts, the Bromson lung effect. Unit 2, reactor, completely liquefied. That's worst case scenario on top of that. And the entire reactor is emitting huge heat. I'm stood up there in that depiction in the top right-hand corner. The building burnt continuously for several days with the fuel pool burning. And even today, they're trying to pretend that the fuel is there. 7-fold increase in radioactive cesium. Cesium is just one of thousands of fission products, by the way, that is coming out of these buildings. But they use that, and my Geiger counter at 299 counts per minute can find cesium, 137, 300, These are incredible numbers. This is a Reactor 2. That's the one building that kind of stayed intact. But the reality was all the fuel got so hot it immediately went down into the earth. In fact, damage at Unit 2 is what prompted TEPCO to discuss evacuating Fukushima workers from the site, is what they're saying. Not Reactor 3, Dana. Okay. And the fuel pools, which is decades, around 12 million pounds in those two pools, around a little over 6 million pounds in each pool. But they got more than that because there's no repository in Japan or anywhere else on the planet. So decades of reactor cores are stored in them, and that's the reactor core. It's gone. They're pretending it's not, of course. That's Reactor 3 originally. There is no building left anymore. And then the melted fuel at Reactor 3 is the highly lethal mixed uranium plutonium oxide, MOX. Fuel, reclaimed uranium, plutonium, americium from nuclear missiles, already gone through chain reaction. That's the explosion of Reactor 3. The buildings is the same as the little one you see there. And that's the fuel pool falling. And we know that because the evidence is very clear. They felt that explosion 25 miles away. And that's what's left of a 190-foot building. They built a structure they brought in with cranes and laid there and disposed of hundreds of homeless doing it. They brought in this contraption they built off-site and pretended they were actually on the top of a nuclear meltdown. They did the same thing at Reactor 4. There is no pools or reactors left. The building is completely gone, gutted, right to the floor. So they decided to pretend that one was okay. You see these bizarre pictures of people in paper suits. They burned these suits at the end of each day, by the way, in the incinerators at the site. They built this structure. They put paneling on it. Think of number 1. Radiation streaming into the atmosphere after number 4 pool boiled dry in the fire. So they put panels all around it. And you can see the building that's left. The building to the right of it doesn't physically touch the other building, by the way. And then they pretended worldwide in the media it looked like that. In reality, and then they showed pictures like this. This is a lethal dose. If you're working in paper suits and you don't get them dirty, you don't got no tools, you got your little lunch bag, you are not up there walking around by a nuclear meltdown. It's simply not true. They're lunatics to even publish something like that. Here's a good shot at the buildings. Because they're claiming it looks like that. That should terrify you. That should horrify you. The fuel was distributed all over the site. And we found this one picture. We can zoom in on it from the back angle. And lo and behold, they didn't clean up that stuff because that's fuel there. It's lethal doses. So both 3 and 4 were 100% faked. So why would they do that? Why would the worldwide medias pretend? So they say that if number 4 reactor fuel pool melts, they would lose 250 kilometers would be evacuated. That's why. So they faked it. There is no building to the right. What I'm trying to tell you is that where the fuel pool, this is the top of what's left, but remember, you've seen the guts hanging out of it. I'll remind you in a second. The fuel pool should be way up there, see? And so these are Photoshop or those people will die that day. Irresponsible rumor claims Fukushima spent fuel pool exploded. Well, the fuel pools are at the top of the building. There is no top to the buildings. And it doesn't look like that. And it can't. So why is the worldwide media pretending that they're in a fuel pool on that building? How do we ever get to that point? And they've been doing that since 2013, pretending they're on top of a building that don't actually exist. Arnie Gunnarsson, who made the assemblies for the fuel pools for this building, refuses to acknowledge it looks like that and claims it looks like that.
Now, the division I ran built nuclear fuel racks for boiling water reactors exactly like Fukushima. And
Unit 4 has always been my biggest concern.
Yeah, well, if it was, you wouldn't lie like that, would you? Doomsday-like radiation release, a fire in a pool at Unit 4 would be a global catastrophe. Well, this is what it looks like, and it happened.
the division I ran built nuclear fuel racks for boiling water reactors exactly like Fukushima.
And so I put him up where the pools are to. So how does he not know the pools are gone? Which means that's an evil, incredibly evil person.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011, leading to the country's worst nuclear disaster.
All the media faking that. Move south of the equator, said Gunnarsson, if the fuel pool goes. Well, the fuel pool is gone. So you can pretend what I'm going to show you and tell you over and over and over is not a big deal, all you want, but it's a catastrophic, cataclysmic event for all the species, not just humans, not just self-centered humans. All the birds, all the insects, all the mammals are brutalized immediately by these incredible plumes. We have incredible amount of documentation of the plumes landing in the northern hemisphere. Absurd amount of the documentation. Levels consistently rise and fall in a 40-day cycle worldwide on top of that, like I showed you many times. Leave the equator, move south of the equator, Unit 4 fuel pool goes dry. What an incredible betrayal for that man to pretend the fuel pools are still there. What an incredible betrayal for media worldwide to go there or to pretend they're there and to actually broadcast claiming they're at the fuel pools. Because you can't see it or smell it or hear it or taste it or touch it or pick it up or throw rocks at it. So these pictures are right after the date that they claim is not the real date, by the way. And you see these steel plates everywhere because of the radiation numbers. They buried a lot of the radiation right on the spot with bulldozers, and they cement over it and pave over it. And these pictures are there. What are you going to do at a nuclear meltdown? Well, nothing. So the rest of the sites, you can poke around and sacrifice people and pretend, get that footage, and then you pretend that you're there restoring the site. And that's what you're seeing, them pretending they're restoring the site of a nuclear meltdown. And eventually you'll stop looking and they'll stop pretending. And they'll stop telling you that everything is okay and everybody ignores it, right? But that's the wrong thing to do. This thing is right by the ocean. Everything runs downhill. The reason they took that shot from so far away because that's lethal doses up there. Nobody can work there. You can't, because they won't admit that what the real problem is. They have now sealed the fate of the majority of the species on the planet. And that if we continue to perpetrate these deceptions and misrepresentations and outrageous bald-faced lies, we will lose all the species in the next short while. This is global warming. Fukushima was the catalyst. Global warming is 75 years of nuclear testing. But it's been accelerated by radioactive fallout. Continuous plumes. You got continuous plumes coming out of Japan that doesn't stop. And so you have a continuous plume covering the entire Pacific, the entire continent, the entire Atlantic, and the entire European and back again. It just never stops coming out. It's a continuous plume. That's the worst case scenario because you can't get a break, you can't escape it. And then we have the studies showing that it's... Now you can extrapolate. By the way, Christopher Rocha, it wasn't him who discovered it, it was students. And then they stole the narrative. He got huge budget, not to do this, but to make isotopes to kill people with. 220 million atoms per liter of just the iodine-129 hitting the... So imagine how bad it is here at ground zero when you had those numbers hitting North America. But I can show you how bad, and I will in a few minutes. So these pictures are they could be a year later, 3 years later. They were probably taken in 2013. There's a lot of evidence suggesting they couldn't work there. And let's go back to that evidence right quickly. Hang on, where are we to here? Okay. Sentence people don't mind dying. Move south of the equator. TEPCO unsure how to access areas of radiation levels around it are 10 sieverts per hour. They're unsure how... Now, TEPCO is not there. The homeless are there, but TEPCO's not. Because 10 sieverts is fatal radiation levels. People at TEPCO didn't sign on for that, okay? That's you have to murder people. No one's going to volunteer to go get murdered by scumbags that were running the site. On top of that were degenerate scumbags. Fukushima Unit 1 and 2 exhaust stacks had measurements over 10 sieverts per hour. Over 10 sieverts per hour. Fatal radiation doses exceeding 10 sieverts per hour, and the measurement devices were maxed out. We've seen quite a few examples of that too, by the way, where the Geiger counters were maxed out. As 10 sieverts is a lethal dose, right? So the pictures I'm showing you, these people are on a site with lethal doses everywhere. I'm going to establish that very quick for you. Water around the site at 1 sievert per hour. 512 sieverts per hour by Reactor 1. Radiation levels of dozens of sieverts by Reactor 2. Dry well meters were at 266 sieverts. These are lethal doses. If you walk past this, you die immediately. 512 sieverts. 100,000 sieverts. A sievert per hour of water from the water is incredible numbers because foot-long pieces of cement that we're putting out a sievert. Now, this is just going to be better. They're not going to be include gamma and alpha and neutrons. These are all separate measurements, right? Water above 1 sievert. 2 sieverts of betaration from a single liter of water. So a gallon is instant death walking past 1 gallon. 3.6 sieverts an hour detected at the rain pipe drain vents. The helicopters can't even go near the site. Okay. Deadly Easter eggs generating radiation higher than 10 sieverts an hour. The holes and the cracks in the grounds are terrifying. Steam, massive clouds of radioactive steam. These are lethal doses. 4.7 sieverts per hour, 20% more than June coming out of a hole in the ground. This is absurd numbers. Okay, so the site is unbelievably radioactive long after the pictures I'm showing you were allegedly taken. Now we're getting somewhere. It takes forever to tell the story. So these pictures, that's basically a no-go zone. You go there, you die. So these stacks, you can't go near those stacks there. Oh, that's the wrong mouse. I have an evacuation zone up there right now. My Geiger counter should be evacuating my house. So this is the world's biggest cement truck for pumping cement. As Swanee D pointed out the other day, they're not for pumping water, they're for pumping cement. It's completely different. And as far as I know, they had hoses attached to it. Well, I don't see evidence of that. Well, you kind of do, I guess. You can kind of see. Let's see if we can spot that, because no, I don't see it. Now the reactors need 1 million gallons per minute. That's 4,500 tons. That's 4,500 one-ton pickup trucks every minute. These can only do about 300 tons a day. So you need a few hundred of them. And so this is pictures from around the site. Up in the top left-hand corner is 44s. We'll bring up 44s very quick. Now remember, there's deadly radiation all around the site. I just showed you. So 44, 21. Conditions around Unit 4 and the Central Radioactive Waste Treatment Facility, which is south of Reactor 4. That stack, you still, even today, you can't go near that stack or the stack behind it. They're lethal doses there. And so these pictures were not released to give you documentation, by no means. They're released to give you something so you go away and leave them alone. Don't start asking questions. That's why they were released. But if you know anything about the subject, you notice the other pictures I was showing you earlier, there's no truck. Because they figured everybody stopped looking, we don't need the trucks anymore. You got to pay for that. They're hard cases. The perpetual lawyers, the industry, its entire legacy is predicated upon deception and misrepresentation and genocide. They're prolific genocide machines is the only way to describe the nuclear industry, particularly in the hospital. So should they get rid of the genocidal chemotherapy? Obviously the study that I showed you earlier was repeated and showed the same outcome. Everything runs downhill to the ocean on top of that. And I'm just scooting through to see if I can glean any kind of documentation. Just introduce you to the site and the story. So these people are carrying a big hose. Nice job there, Dana. Way to screw it up. I'm sorry. It's been a long day. I'm working really hard. Can't get everything right. These channels are brutal doses, yeah? We got to do another show on that. They took down my other site with 24,000 subscribers while I was out doing a species count, looking for spiders out in the woods 450 kilometers away from base. I was camping out every night on the train tracks that are abandoned for 20 years. You have a trail going across the province for 900 kilometers. So it's a good way to get access to the interior of the province. But it's a tough gig. I'm not no spring chicken. And so lethal doses in these trenches, I can do a whole show just on trenches. Shocking numbers, just terrifying numbers. These sites are the size of a small city. And so anybody that gets these jobs, they're not even wearing Scotty backpacks. The whole site is lethal doses all around the site, from the fuel rods being splattered at high velocity from destroyed buildings. It's so hard to wrap your mind around it, even And then you come to my site and I provide you with an absurd amount of information in 1 hour period or so. And I hope, and I like to think, right, that the average person, if you provide the documentation, they can figure it out too, see? They can wrap their mind around it. But they can't wrap their mind around it if you don't know what the big lie is, if you don't understand 75 years this industry has been hoodwinking and gaslighting the entire planet by design, right? They've captured the regulators a long time ago, decades ago. They captured all your universities decades ago. Captured all your media's complete capture of the media. No dissenting opinions now for this industry whatsoever. Without the usual sawhorse lies and dance that comes from 75 years of propaganda. 75 years of propaganda where their children will go to universities from the industry, and to get a job, they got to get a degree to go out and tell a lie. Because they got a degree, why would they lie? But that's how it actually works. And I know that sounds crazy if you're not familiar with this, how the world really works. That might seem crazy to you. But that is actually how the world works. Like your whole world, most people's life cycle, they're fed an absurd amount of propaganda. And it all goes back to the war machine. It's at the top of the list of misery. I'll play you Patrick Clausen. Patrick Clausen from the Washington Institute think tank was trying to figure out how do you get to war with Iran, because the current president doesn't seem like he wants to go to a war with Iran. It'll be best if somebody else started the war. And goes on to recite all recent wars in history and how they were staged events by the government to get us into war.
I frankly think that crisis initiation is really tough. And it's very hard for me to see how the United States president can get us to war with Iran. Some people might think Mr. Wilson wanted to get us into World War I. You may recall he had to wait for the Lusitania episode. Some people might think that Mr. Johnson wanted to send troops to Vietnam. You may recall he had to wait for the Gulf of Tonkin episode. We didn't go to war with Spain until the until the Maine exploded. And may I point out that Mr. Lincoln did not feel he could call out the Federal Army until Fort Sumter was attacked, which is why he ordered the commander at Fort Sumter to do exactly that thing which the South Carolinians had said would cause an attack. Some people might think that Mr. Roosevelt wanted to get us into World War II, as David mentioned. You may recall we had to wait for Pearl Harbor. So if, in fact, the Iranians aren't going to compromise, it would be best if somebody else started the war.
Have you ever heard anything like that in your life? He just said all the wars in history were staged by governments. They committed the atrocity, blamed it on another country to get the consent of the people to support them in the war. That's how the world actually works. Workers confirm TEPCO's taking weekends off at Fukushima because, there are deadly Easter eggs everywhere. Time to make a suicide squad. So, very confusing, I'm sure, for the average person. I get that. I'm not doing this because there's glory in it or there's fun in it. I'm doing this because I have a moral compass that is driven like the tide. There is nothing I can do about it. We have to do the tough jobs. And it's no cakewalk, and it's frustrating not to be able to do the things I need to do. It's frustrating because I've been relentlessly hounded by the nuclear industry for long before Fukushima happened. And it hasn't slowed down. I have personal trolls from the industry that has hounded me for years and years and years, have assailed everything I've done And when I was on the ocean, unable to defend myself, I was under siege. And they were very good at what they do. Propaganda is their expertise. And I have suffered personally from their assaults. I've been arrested multiple times, vilified and demonized in the worldwide media for something I didn't do. And then under siege every day since. And I show up and I go to war because nobody else is going to do it. They were trying to drive me away, and I'm pretty sure the average person would have ran. So they're not showing you pictures of them working on the reactor, because they're not working on the reactor. They're showing you pictures of everything but them working on the reactor. Go closer. No. Jerry died there yesterday. I'm not going past that point. That was just a fluke. He had a weak heart. I'll give you an extra $1,000 if you go down and touch Medusa. That's what these reactors are, Medusa. So this was the explosion, obviously. Otherwise, everything would have been washed away, right? That was the detonations. One of the reactors took out some of the buildings around it. Whoever got this job to go in and take it were probably given $2,000. Pick a check up in a couple of weeks and they would have died that day. Give your camera to the tattoo guy on the way out. This is madness. This is the waterfront. There was lethal doses everywhere years later. So they're down by the shoreline, a couple of people, three or four people at a time, wearing Tyvek or paper suits. The homeless are given paper suits. The mentally ill are given paper suits. They're usually given second-hand paper suits that somebody used on the shift before. And they allegedly burned 7,000 paper suits every day at this site. Have you seen 7,000 people in these pictures? You go near that stack you see up there, that's a death. You die. And if it wasn't deadly there, you would see 1,000 people, not 3 or 4. It's reactor 1, what's left of it. Reactor 2, that's reactor 4, and reactor 3 is over right there. What's left of it. The emissions from reactor 4 is an instant death. That's instant death. Reactor 3 is right there. That's instant death. You can't get close. Say if just this reactor here melted down, you couldn't get near that reactor because that's a lethal dose all the way over to there. But each of those stacks, those towers, are lethal doses anywhere near them. 25 sieverts or more. That's purgatory. That's hell right there. Because you don't live very long and it's misery for every split second. And let me slow down for 1 second. We're up at 50. 50. That's not the one. This one. Seawater intake. We looked at that. I get lost in translation. Development of road access. Conditions inside administration office building. Well, that was actually blown apart, right? From the detonations. Not from the tsunami. 48 is conditions around the central radioactive waste treatment facilities. Lots of stuff in it already. Conditions of the seaside area, Unit 3 and 4, entrance of the trench vertical shaft. Those trenches, turns out, even today are lethal doses by the kilogram out of those trenches. Yeah, it's kind of a so much work to do this anyway, but very vague pictures. This is around 3 and 4 on the pool side, or the ocean side. What is this? So that's the pile of debris down in front of the pump house, on the back of the pump house. We want you two guys to walk over there for a minute. I'll pay you an extra $100. I'll do it, boss. That's the wells where the pump water would normally go in, 1 million gallons a minute. It's not like you can restore water. It's not like you could fix anything. And so the question is, what are they doing there? They're documenting it, I guess. It's a death sentence. You should be wearing a Scotty backpack, like a tank and a Pegasus face mask and stuff like that. It's madness. The whole story is just madness. So the guy who's taking the picture, I bet you he didn't get a job after, because he would have died. He's wandering around taking pictures. Yeah, that's the last thing you want to be doing. It's really something, isn't it? Tsunamis. But the radiation is just absurd. The numbers are absurd worldwide now. You can't fix anything there. Like maybe down in front of Reactor 5 you can do some work, because the building, there's nothing you can do there to fix it. Otherwise there'd be hundreds of people there. If it was safe, there'd be hundreds and hundreds of people instead of 2 or 3. Look, Ma, no taste buds. How bad is it, George? Well, they gave him basically default Geiger counters. These are not experts because they're not wearing containment suits. They're not wearing Scotty backpacks right by a nuclear meltdown. If the date is supposed to be, because this is number 51, conditions inside the power station site. This is supposed to be the 30th, 19 days later, or 20 days later, rather. There's zero possibility this is 20 days later, because the evidence shows the numbers. This must be 2 years later, and that's standard of TEPCO. TEPCO is always such... Anybody, when it comes to the nuclear industry, when it comes to the nuclear industry, just weirdos. Weekends off at Fukushima plant. Weekends off at the Fukushima plant. Should chemotherapy be banned and replaced with DCA? That's the poll tonight. Because DCA has been shown to cure... Oh, that's a great move, Dana. DCA has been shown to cure cancer. And you can buy it on Amazon.com. And the pure DCA, you just take a little tiny itty bitty of that on top of a very small spoonful and put it in about 1/4 of a glass and drink that 3 times a day. Or you can buy pills, or you can buy the diluted stuff, 99.9%. It reduced all tumors, bar nothing. And you can order it into Canada. They do ship to Canada. Canada banned it because it was a 100% success rate in curing cancers. No debate, never informed the population of Canada. They just banned it. But if in the United States, you can go into your pharmacies, and if you got a compound chemist, they can actually make it right on site. Get that pure stuff. So the pure stuff, take a little tiny bit, mix it with a little tiny bit of water with a Q-tip, and put it on a little nick or scratch, and it should sting like friggin' hell. It'll also just annihilate warts. It'll destroy warts in 2 or 3 days. They'll never come back again on top of that. That's just a very small, like 2 or 3 drops of water and a little tiny bit of this, mix it together. You'll actually kill warts and stuff like that. Weekends off at Fukushima. Yeah, because it's lethal doses everywhere. It's not weekends off. And that's 2012 they're talking about there. That's 2012. So I showed you at the beginning how bad chemo was. It's insidiously bad. It's revoltingly bad, right? Let me get going again here. Fukushima draft. You're not going to hear that for coal plant, oil plant, gas plants, or anything like that. You're only going to hear those types of attributes. Let's look at some more of these pictures before we call it. So you're not seeing hundreds of people, or dozens of people, or a dozen people. If you're seeing dozens and dozens and hundreds of people, then you can say, well, it must be pretty safe there, see? When you're only seeing nobody or a couple of people, it's because it's not safe there. It's gamma shine everywhere, there's neutrons everywhere. This will penetrate through 2 feet of steel from the assemblies. Just the whole story is a disaster. And he made it worse by lying for 10, almost 11 years now. Constant lies. And now we jeopardized all the species, the entire planet, permanently. We're on life support as we speak. We see gigantic storms, incredible storms that we've never seen before pre-Fukushima. We're seeing them regularly every other week or month during cyclone, typhoons, hurricane seasons. Regular storms coming ashore 200 miles per hour. 200 miles per hour sustained winds with gusts in the 260 to 300 mile per hour, wiping out entire cities and communities that are, some of these storms were 700, 800, 900 miles across. Just pummeling Texas, pummeling Puerto Rico, pummeling Haiti, pummeling Taiwan, pummeling the Philippines, pummeling China with these gigantic supercell storm after storm after storm in a season. And none of these places have infrastructure laws to deal with that kind of wind because we've never had it before, right? This has caused the Fukushima effect of heating up the planet. It heats up the planet. The whole planet is pulsing energy nonstop at the speed, almost the speed of light, almost 186,000 miles per second, pulsing, invisible. So imagine if you had a snowstorm covering the entire planet sustained for 11 years. Would the planet cool down? Yeah. And so likewise, if you have a invisible snowstorm, but it's heat, pulsing heat every second, the planet has to respond accordingly. And you break down, at the same time you destroy the bases of the food chain, the bases of the oxygen chain, the bases of the carbon sequestering chain, the phytoplankton, which is an immediate trickle effect, because once you break the food chain, you broke the food chain. But you'll expect to see tides or currents to change because of the temperature differences and salinity and everything else. You expect to see adverse conditions, and we've seen all that manifest. Let's keep going, finish it. Hello, everybody. Yeah, we don't. Okay, here we go again. Now, there's links below to all these pictures if you want to download them yourself. This is lethal doses everywhere here. There's fuel rods, fuel assemblies mixed in with all this debris from the tsunami. Absurd amount of damage, isn't it? And so if you're going to try to fix that, you need tradespeople. You need people that actually know what they're doing. You can't just send in the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society and the immigrants who don't speak the language and expect them to get it together and figure it out. Nuclear scientists won't go near the site. The IAEA said they were going to go down and test the water at Fukushima. I was like, hey, that's interesting. They went about 20 miles offshore. They didn't go to the nuclear site and test the tanks. They're not going to test no tanks. TEPCO won't let anybody test the tanks. Tanks are empty. If the tanks were full, you couldn't stay on the site, see? Because each tank would be at least 1.4 million sieverts of beta, which means it's a lethal dose from several miles away. So it would also be full of gamma and X-rays and neutrons and alpha. It's not just going to be beta. So to show you these pictures, it doesn't give you a lot to work with, those particular pictures. But when you put it in the big body of material that we already have, you're able to understand why, where's all the people, where's all the equipment. Have you ever seen in a city where they fix a pothole? They got every truck in the block, in a city block there. They got all kinds of different types of equipment. They got 12 people there leaning on shovels. They got people with this and people with that. There's all kinds of... You don't see any of it, see? Because it's lethal doses everywhere. And a couple of trucks is not going to pump 1 million gallons a minute in each of the buildings. So it was all show and tell, and not alarm the planet was the priority, because otherwise nuclear industry, you start looking at the rest of the worldwide nuclear industry, right? So they wanted to hide what was going on because they can't stand scrutiny. They can't survive an actual scrutiny. The nuclear industry, everybody in the nuclear industry should have to get chemotherapy immediately. You won't see anybody joining the nuclear industry ever again. You do that one. Everybody who wants to join the nuclear industry got to get 9 chemotherapy shots. That's the end of the nuclear industry. But last year was 300 nuclear power plants where the renewables came online worldwide. 261 gigawatts. This year was equal to 333 nuclear power plants of renewable energies, like wind and solar and hydroelectric and stuff like that. That's 633 nuclear power plants were the renewables in 24 months. They expect by 2026, another 4 years, to have 5,500 more nuclear power plants where the renewable energy is online, which is more energy than all current nuclear power plants and fossil fuel like oil, gas, and coal energy power plants on the entire planet. All of it will be online in renewables in the next 4 years. So at that point, nuclear is obsolete, see? And if you use compressed hydro or compressed air for storage, where you dig big shafts and you fill it up with compressed air and pumped hydro with excess energy, that's the end of storage. You might be able to use batteries in certain places, but the majority of places you can fulfill it with pumped hydro and compressed air storage. And we have examples of that now that we can show you. I'm not going to bother doing it right now because... So there was pictures, and you can see the rear view mirror there, right? Behind me. They were driving around taking random pictures and zooming in on a lot of these spots. Sometimes they would give the people, the homeless they picked up, to go walk down there and get some pictures. They were doing that, right? $3,000-$4,000. You'd be surprised what somebody will do when they got nothing. How bad is the dose you're going to get? Oh, it's like flying on an airplane or climbing a mountain, right? It'll be okay. That's what they tell these people. They're savages, eh? It's a coward thing to do, what they do, the nuclear industry does. It's truly one of the most coward things they do. They destroy all the species and all the humanity, and they're sleeper cells. The nuclear industry is full of sleeper cells. So, we're back at this conundrum. We'll make it through 53. Such crappy pictures. You expect that out of nuclear meltdown. I'm not complaining. I'm grateful to get any pictures. But nobody's ever come out and tried to flush out these pictures. Helen Caldicott and Ernie Gunnarsson and Christopher Busby included. Their job is to sell you the lie. I was really disappointed, a number of years back when I discovered that Ernie Gunnarsson, Helen Caldicott, and Christopher Busby were setting you up. And they took great pride in lying to you. It was really something. They still do, by the way. They take pride in lying to the population and tricking them when it comes to nuclear and poison. That's 54. That's where I wanted to stop. Right. 5401. Now they got that sprayed. See that piece there sprayed and circled with red paint? That's do not go near that spot. There are also later pictures the next time. You might start seeing some more of that. There is some great examples here. Spots you don't want to be close to that they're lethal doses. Hello, Mr. Dana. How are you? I was burnt out. So what was the poll do for us tonight? We got 32 votes. Last night they spammed the daylights out of me, eh? Last night they spammed me good. I had 7 thumbs down before the video was halfway over. That was pretty effective because I was talking about chemo at the beginning of it, right? Just got to go in and turn on the embedding because that's always switched off when I go live. And I always forget to go in right away and allow embedding because the nuclear industry got me censored. I don't even exist anymore. That was okay, wasn't it? It's a tough gig doing what I'm doing, tell you what. I wouldn't wish it on anybody. Everybody wants to attack me. Everybody wants me to do what they want done. It's just madness. It's a full-time job just keeping this show alive. And all the research, now we got winter's set in. Waiting for the big snowfall to start showing up. Minus 15 last night and today. Wind chill, that is. Anyway, who cares, right? Ran into the ground, and that's all you can do. I'd rather be ran into the ground every day than let the nuclear industry genocide and omnicide the entire planet. It's a small price to pay to fight back. God bless everybody. Hugs for everybody. Have a great night, everybody. We'll see everybody tomorrow night for the final show of the week, hopefully, which is Thursday night's show. We'll get through another few hundred pictures, hopefully. And our poll done good tonight. Thank you for participating in it. And the poll was 32 votes. 97% said chemotherapy should be banned and replaced with DCA. If you're not familiar with that, watch the beginning of the video when you get a chance. Hugs for everybody. Good night, everybody. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Have a great one.